My name is Ethan Swenson, and my research project was in the area of sleep deprivation. So about 1/3 of our lifetime is spent sleeping, and this equates to about 26 hours, or about 9,500 days over the course of our life, which is 26 days, and that's about how much we spend sleeping. So this should just show how important sleeping is. And as explained by Erica Jansen of the University of Michigan, sleep is essential to every process in the body as it affects our physical and mental health and how we function the next day. And sleep is of utmost importance as it allows our body to slow down and recover and heal from the previous day to help us prepare for the next day. And there are many things, especially now, that are more prevalent that hinder our sleep and make us go to bed later, and this causes us to sleep less and less, such as exercising right before bed, screen time, which is even more prevalent in teenagers, and many other things such as eating and staying up late for work and school. And sleep deprivation is a pandemic in itself that has spread across not only the nation but the world. And according to Ruth Ann Richer of Stanford Medicine, more than 87% of high schoolers in the United States get far less than the recommended 8 to 10 hours. And the amount of time they sleep is still decreasing, which is a serious threat to their health, safety, and academic success. My research question is, what are the cognitive effects of sleep deprivation on high school students, specifically boys, aged 14 through 18 years old? And as explained in the background, sleep deprivation is especially important among teenagers, and the students at Brophy Prep provided me with more than enough data. Just to set the stage for what I'm trying to accomplish, I'm trying to accomplish a correlational study with the variables of the amount of sleep that each student gets and their academic performance or cognitive performance, which will be measured through their GPA, both weighted and unweighted, to show even more deeply if they take honors classes or AP classes. And this GPA is important because it measures over time rather than a lot of the studies that I looked at in the literature review that were just one-night things where they had their participants not sleep for, say, a period of 24 hours, 26 hours, things like that. And the first study that I looked at was by Shoham Chosen Hillel of the School of Business Administration at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And he tested 33 medical residents, and they were evaluated twice, once at the baseline, and like I said, once after a 26-hour shift in which they did not sleep at all. And the measures included computerized tests of attention and behavior, and the results were that their chronic sleep curtailment was associated with greater impulsivity, slower cognitive processing, and greater mistakes in their field. And another article that I looked at was by Paola Chahim of the ABC Medical Center in Mexico. And she aimed to find what the effect of chronic sleep deprivation was on essential neurophysical tests, including executive functions. And her results used the Stroop test as well as other scales to evaluate the executive functions in the postgraduate students that she tested. And her results were that chronic sleep deprivation caused an alteration in selective attention, working memory, processing speed, and inhibition. And the final piece of literature that I looked at was by Patrick Youssef of the School of Medicine in London. His participants were randomized into two conditions: normal sleep or one night of sleep deprivation. And sleep deprivation was monitored using an online time-stamp questionnaire at 45-minute intervals to make sure that his participants stayed awake or were sleeping. And he tested working memory and again executive function as well as reaction time. And his results were that acute sleep deprivation had a significant effect on the blood pressure and reaction time in his students. And however, he concluded that cognitive and neurophysical impairment in other functions was not as widespread as previously thought. And this study found that an all-nighter does not affect a student's cognitive ability as much as longer behavior of not sleeping and sleep deprivation would. And this shows that a study like mine fills in this gap of overtime and longevity of sleep deprivation rather than just the current field, which focuses on all-nighters, like I said before. And for my method, I sent out a series of surveys measuring, recording the students' GPAs, both weighted and unweighted, as well as the amount of hours they sleep. First of all, it designated whether they got the recommended hours of sleep each night, there was 3 categories: less than 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours, or greater than 10 hours of sleep. And then I combined this with, I analyzed this, like I said, correlated the amount of hours of sleep they got with their cognitive abilities, measuring their GPA, as well as I asked if any of them had participated in an all-nighter, which I defined as staying up all night, doing whatever they were doing, and then when it came time to wake up, they just didn't go to bed and they just went on with the next day. And as I said, I combined the surveys, and I originally planned to do cognitive tests, such as the ones used for concussion baseline testing, but my methodology changed and I just stuck with the surveys as I found that the GPAs and questions I asked were sufficient. And my first results show how many hours of sleep and the percentage of the respondents, how much hours of sleep that they got each night. And it shows that 55% of my respondents received less than 8 hours of sleep each night. And 44% of my respondents received 8 to 10, which is the recommended, and a tiny amount, a sliver, received greater than 10, which is expected, especially among high school students. And those who received 8 or more hours of sleep, the average GPA was about 3.8, and the average weighted GPA was about 3.85. And those who received less than 8 hours of sleep, the average GPA was about 3.5, but the average weighted GPA was about 3.9. And I'll discuss this discrepancy or this trend after the next. So I also asked about the amount of students that had participated in an all-nighter, and surprisingly, 56% had participated in an all-nighter, and basically I correlated this to the amount of, like I said, hours of sleep that they got in their GPA, and like I said, there was an interesting statistic of how those who got less than 8 hours of sleep, their GPA was comparable to or even higher than those who got the recommended 8 hours of sleep. And I think this can be attributed to the fact that students who stay up later working on schoolwork and do not get the recommended 8 hours, they're more dedicated to their schoolwork, and that resulted in them getting higher grades and their GPAs being higher. And especially on the weighted GPA, that statistic, the students who got less sleep had higher weighted GPAs, and I think that is correlated with the fact that, like I said, they spend more time and are more dedicated to school, and they are more willing to take honors and EP classes, as that is the only way that their weighted GPA could be higher than their unweighted GPA. And some of my limitations were, like I said, I was relying on others to help me gain the test results of the students of their concussion testing, but I was unable to expedite that and get all of the results in a timely manner. So I had to change to just my GPA results. And like I said, I relied on the students' responses, and I cannot control them, and I cannot be completely sure that they were telling the truth, as I did have open-ended questions, and I did receive a couple of responses that were thrown out due to the students, how they answered them. And there was some lack of commitment and loss of interest in the students, as they only completed part of the surveys, as there were multiple students who only answered a couple of the questions. They only gave the amount of hours of sleep that they got, but they did not give their GPAs. And I also had to, like I said, I changed that last part, so I was having to work with Mr. White and his programs, but I did change that, so that was a limitation. So, in conclusion, these results can be used to look at the not only population of Brophy Prep, but the high school population in general, as it shows that the sleep deprivation does in fact have a negative effect, as all the studies that I said had concluded. And this study showed it over a greater length of time, as GPAs are accumulated over, in some of the cases, 3 to 4 years, as I had respondents ranging from freshmen to seniors. And I think that sleep deprivation and its negative effects should be more known to students, and that high schools especially should educate their students on this, as it is, as I said, a pandemic in today's world and is only getting worse.